Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Some secret XRP documents have been revealed. That's right. And it's thanks to a FOIA request. That's, of course, the Freedom of Information Act request. You can see the headline on your screen here from Decrypt. Coinbase releases treasure trove of SEC docs on Ethereum, XRP, and more. Okay, so I'll just tell you this at the outset. It turns out that Ripple effectively told the SEC to F off about a year after the lawsuit against them from the SEC began. And so we now know that in the midst of the lawsuit, the SEC began demanding information about a completely separate matter which had nothing to do with the lawsuit. And Ripple, turns out, just wasn't having it. A letter from the SEC to Ripple has now been made public, thanks to, again, this FOIA request, as well as the response to the SEC, which came from Ripple's chief legal officer, Stuart Alderodi. Plenty to share with you here. It's fun to see the behind-the-scenes stuff, Like, there was so much going on behind the scenes between Ripple and the SEC, and, the vast majority of that, other than publicly filed documents and stuff, like, we're never going to know that. It's just interesting to get a peek behind the veil. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so let's jump in here. Leading U.S. exchange Coinbase has shared documents revealing the SEC's internal discussions about XRP and Ethereum's security status. Coinbase obtained this internal communication through Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) requests to several U.S. federal agencies, including the SEC. According to to internal emails from 2021, the SEC staffers questioned whether XRP exhibits certain security characteristics. Notably, the securities agency, at one point, internally discussed asking an expert what risks the XRP ledger might suffer if Ripple ceased operations and walked away. Well, folks, as you and I well know, if Ripple just suddenly ceased to exist, I mean, there could technically be some market panic, like, they'd be like, where'd they go? Why did they cease to exist? Did they spontaneously combust? There'd be questions like that. But setting that aside, functionally, the XRP ledger would be just fine, as it turns out, because it's decentralized. There is no central point of failure, and you don't need to hire a freaking expert to find that out. Do an internet search. You stupid SEC asshat pricks. Use your fat little fingers to type in the question, and then the internet will spit out the information, because the internet is the sum of all human knowledge, and it's at your fat little fingertips. It's at the edge of your fat little fingertips. Like, you can do this, you asshat pricks. It burns my biscuits. Anyway, peace continues here. In a separate letter dated December 9th, 2021, the SEC directly referred to XRP as a security. The regulator made this known when expressing disappointment regarding Ripple's planned launch of its liquidity hub. That's right. And so a couple of things here. The liquidity hub, which now ceases to exist. They tried a thing. Not everything that a business tries is going to end up working out. But it was basically like the crypto equivalent of what Priceline does or what Kayak does. And so Ripple was basically connecting buyers and sellers. So they weren't actually going to do the transactions themselves. It's the same with Priceline. You're connecting buyers and sellers. That's all Ripple was trying to do. As I was joking around at the time, they're basically playing they're like a matchmaker service. That's pretty much what it is. That's what I used to say back in the day when we were talking about this, when this was new, just to describe the concept of this. Also worth mentioning, the SEC, if you asked them during this litigation if they're claiming that XRP itself is a security, they would tell you no. Now, of course, the arguments they'd make would indicate that they do believe XRP is a security, but they'd tell you straight to your face that it's not. But then in these letters, they are blatantly asserting that XRP is a security, which I find both stupid and hilarious. It is both of those things. So check this out. Look what these asshat pricks had to say. I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's not necessary. I want to get to a couple highlights here. But this is what the SEC wrote to Stuart Alderodi, who is the chief legal officer, December 9th, 2021. So this is almost one full year after the SEC sued Ripple. And let me highlight this part right here. We are disappointed that Ripple has chosen to move forward with the Ripple Liquidity Hub platform without first seeking guidance from SEC staff in the Office of the Strategic Hub for Innovation and Financial Technology, FinHub, as to how the federal securities laws may apply to its conduct. Based on the information we currently possess, we are concerned that Ripple, either directly or indirectly, is planning to facilitate the offer and sale of XRP and other digital assets that are securities through the Ripple Liquidity Hub platform as an unregistered broker-dealer or exchange without an available exemption from registration under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. Due to these concerns, we request Ripple provide written responses to the following questions on or before December 23rd, 2021. And I'm not going to read all the questions. If you want to pause here, I'm scrolling down so you can stop and read through them. But just for the sake of time, it's not necessary to get some of the more key ideas across in my humble opinion here. But here we are coming up to Christmas. And here's a surprise. You have a couple weeks to do this massive assignment here, like while you're doing all this other stuff to fight us. And here's another letter. We're going to get to the Ripple one after this because Stuart Alderati fired back, and I was very happy to see how he forcefully wrote to the SEC. First, here's another SEC letter. This one to CoinMe, which was an initial partner with Ripple, engaging with Ripple Liquidity Hub transactions here. And I just wanted to highlight, I think there was the third paragraph here. Yeah, this is what they wrote to him. Based on information we currently possess, we are concerned that CoinMe, either directly or indirectly, is planning to offer and sell or facilitate the offer and sale of XRP and other digital assets that are securities through the Ripple Liquidity Hub platform as an unregistered broker-dealer without an available exemption from registration under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. So right there, the key part is we believe that we are concerned that CoinMe is blah, 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 offer and sale of XRP and other digital assets that are securities. Right there, bam. XRP and other digital assets and their securities. This flies in the face of what they're arguing, they'd say to your face, in the SEC v. Ripple case. No, we're not saying XRP itself is a security. It's just computer code. What are you talking about? We're not arguing that, no. But here they are. And this is one of the most blatant examples of that. And it's separate from the SEC v. Ripple case, but taking place during the time that the lawsuit was occurring. Oh my God. These freaking people, all we can do is laugh now. At least it's in the past. So let me share with you now what Stuart Alderati had to say here. Now, let me scroll down a little bit further here. I think this is it right here. Yeah, this is it right here. All right, check this out. Oh my Lord. This is so this is what Stuart Alderati, Ripple's chief legal officer, wrote back to the SEC. And it was on the last day, December 23rd, 2021. That's the last day that the SEC was requested by anyway. And some contact information is redacted, so I'll say redacted anywhere that pops up. Dear Redacted, this is in response to Redacted cover email dated December 10th, 2021, and the accompanying letter from Redacted dated December 9th, 2021. Redacted letter requested a response by December 23rd, 2021. That requested response date, less than 2 weeks after the letter was sent and in the middle of the holiday season, is unreasonable under any circumstances. Well, folks, he's obviously right. It's very clear that the SEC gives zero FOX about disrupting the holiday season for anybody even loosely associated with XRP. Because you know that Ripple got sued by the SEC on December 22nd, 2020, 3 days before Christmas, on then SEC Chair Jay Clayton's last full day as SEC chair. That was it. And he walked out the door. He's like, Bob Felicia, and he just gave the lawsuit. That was it. So yeah, they give zero FOX. They give zero of that particular animal. Anyway, Stewart continues. That date is even more unreasonable here, given that, as the SEC is well aware, Ripple is in the midst of completing expert discovery in SEC v. Ripple Labs, Inc., the litigation. Numerous depositions have taken place in the past few weeks, and there are numerous more scheduled in the coming weeks under the expedited discovery schedule. Ripple's resources now and in the coming weeks are therefore focused on meeting its discovery obligations in the litigation rather than on this new request. Moreover, your statement that the SEC is, quote, disappointed that Ripple has chosen to move forward with the Ripple Liquidity Hub platform without first seeking guidance from SEC staff in the Office of Strategic Hub for Innovation and Financial Technology, FinHub, as to how the federal securities laws may apply to its conduct, end quote, is confounding given A, the pending litigation and Ripple's efforts for over 2 years to work with SEC prior to its filing, B, the fact that the SEC is not Ripple's prudential regulator, folks, and that's obviously true. So I just got to pause to say, thankfully it's 2025, and that's now accepted that the SEC is just not in charge of crypto. Back then, they were trying to assert that they were, even though Congress didn't give them any authority over the crypto asset class. They were just trying to snag it. It was a regulatory land grab. That's what we were actually living through. Anyway, Stewart continues. C, the numerous public reports indicating that engagement with the SEC has ultimately been met with an enforcement action or a threat of one, with no guidance at all. There is no requirement or obligation that Ripple consult with the SEC over how to conduct its business. Okay, so I will pause and note that's unquestionably true. In fact, not only is it true, but Ripple is one of those companies that actually did go in to be transparent and seek guidance, and that's one of the reasons they got sued ultimately. It's lead generation for the SEC. Anyway, Stewart continues. Having said that, your letter, while making clear that this is a fact-finding inquiry and does not mean that we have concluded that anyone has violated the law, that's the quote from the SEC, appears to focus on how the federal securities laws may apply to Ripple's introduction of its Liquidity Hub product. Given Ripple's current plans, we do not believe the product poses any securities-related issue. Liquidity Hub is a software product which allows customers, CoinMe in the first instance as an alpha customer, and additional customers in the future, to use smart order routing to trade select digital assets at optimized prices from existing liquidity venues such as exchanges and OTC desks. So folks, he's just saying, that's a fancy way of saying, we're playing matchmaker, we're connecting buyers and sellers. With markets that already exist, we're just saying, hey, let me introduce you to so-and-so. That's pretty much it. Then he wrote, through Liquidity Hub, Ripple is planning to provide its customers access to the following digital assets at launch: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum Classic, and Litecoin. XRP is not on the list. These 5 supported digital assets have been listed on many platforms within the United States for years without any objection by the SEC. Thus, there is no basis to your statement that Ripple is, quote, planning to facilitate the offer and sale of digital assets that are securities, end quote. Yeah, there's nothing to that, obviously. In fact, they intentionally didn't offer XRP just for that reason. They went extra out of their way to make sure that they weren't giving ammo to those asshat pricks over at the SEC. And then Stewart threw a little threat back their way, and I say good. He wrote, there is no conceivable securities violation arising from Ripple's Liquidity Hub activities, and the continuation of this inquiry will be reasonably seen as an effort to unfairly target and intimidate Ripple and evade discovery orders and deadlines in the midst of the litigation. I trust that this addresses the concerns raised in your letter. Ripple preserves and does not waive any privileges. Respectfully, Stewart Alderati. Instead of respectfully, like what I would have loved to have seen is just, fuck you, Stewart Alderati. That would have just been chef's kiss, you know? Of course he wouldn't do that. He's being professional. I'm just being a little moon Lambo over here. I know. But I so despise those creatures. I so despise them. It just would have been delightful in my mind. And so there we go, a little peek behind the curtain, some secret XRP-related documents that we only have thanks to a FOIA request from Coinbase. And now you know. I'm just glad this chapter's over. I'm glad it's 2025. This is way, way, way better. Way better in 2021. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Lambo.